They told you that intelligence is noisy, that brilliant minds are always calculating, always talking, always proving their worth at whatever table they sit at. That's a lie. The most comforting lie that the weak, the anxious, and the desperate tell themselves to justify their own lack of self-control. The stark, cold truth, the one Machiavelli understood in the very core of human power, is that excessive thinking is not strategy. It's fear disguised as preparation. Excessive words are not persuasion, it's bloodletting. Every time you over-explain, justify your actions to people who didn't even ask, and debate every possible scenario in your head to the point of mental exhaustion, you're not in control of the game. You are pathetically begging for external validation. You are surrendering your crown, dismantling your own empire, one useless word at a time. I want you to look directly at your invisible wounds now. Think about those early mornings when your mind transformed into a merciless court, judging things that have already passed, anticipating tragedies that will never happen. Think about that moment when you realized a second too late that you had spoken more than you should have. You tried to fill the silence because it bothered you. You tried to sound superior, to seem insightful. But what remained when the conversation ended was only the bitter taste of regret, the clear smell of weakness emanating from you. The average man, the mediocre one, believes he needs to react to every provocation, to every stimulus. He is a slave to his own emotions. He wastes all his vital energy fighting imaginary battles within his own skull, or pouring empty speeches into ears that secretly despise him. He is like a castle with its gates wide open, plundered daily by his own insecurities. But there's a completely different mental architecture, a sovereignty that the masses will never experience. True strength, the kind that is dense, lethal, and magnetic, is only born in the exact millisecond when you decide to think less, speak less, and focus absurdly more. It is your initiation into the art of becoming a silent predator in a world teeming with hysterical prey. Silence has never been a void. It is an overwhelming presence. When you cut through the noise, you finally see the strings that manipulate the fools. What I'm going to do with you over these next few minutes isn't just give you superficial tips. It's a brutal psychological deconstruction. I'm going to show you how to forge an unbreakable fortress, where your attention becomes a blade so sharp it cuts through the illusions around you. But that's just the surface. The real abyss is much darker and deeper. Now I'm going to show you where almost everyone destroys themselves, because the real problem isn't in what you say, but in the invisible illness that compels you to speak. The great illusion of modernity is treating silence and focus as mere productivity techniques or empty social cues. Reducing self-control to a cheap trick for social interaction is a colossal insult to the true nature of power. What we are dissecting here is not simple mechanical behavior or a temporary pose to impress others. It is the very backbone of your identity. It is an absolute matter of psychological architecture and personal sovereignty. By mapping the abyss of the mind, the densest philosophy teaches us a brutal truth. The common man is driven by blind impulses, irrational fears, and pathetic vanity. When you don't govern your instincts from the unshakable throne of your conscience, this lower urgency takes absolute control. It transforms you into an automatic reactor. Every catastrophic scenario you invent in your own head, every desperate word or justification that escapes your mouth is a symptom of your hidden fragility. It is your ego bleeding in the public square, begging for validation. The excess of words is fundamentally the begging of the soul. The fool panics viscerally when the noise ceases and the atmosphere cools. Do you know why? Because in absolute silence, the masks melt. In silence, he's forced to look in the mirror and confront his own mediocrity. To escape this inner abyss, he talks incessantly. He explains himself to those who didn't even ask. He lays all his weaknesses, his fears, and his intentions bare on a silver platter to any predator on duty. But observe the anomalies of the system. Observe the men of real power. They don't operate on the noisy frequency of scarcity. Machiavelli bequeathed to us that the arena of human life is treacherous, and the only way to avoid being devoured is to become completely unfathomable. Strategic silence is the wall of black ice that hides your deepest intentions. Thinking less is not a sign of ignorance. It's pruning emotional chaos so that the blade of your mind becomes frighteningly sharp, ready to cut only what matters. When you choose not to react, you wrest from the world the power to control your state of mind. You cease to be predictable prey. You're not just shutting your mouth, you're suffocating your fragile ego so that your untouchable self can be born. You abandon the reactive servant posture and take the center of your own empire. But there's an even deeper layer to all of this. Knowing that silence is a weapon is just theory. Now comes the part that changes everything. I'm going to reveal the invisible mechanism that operates within your brain and why your mind was biologically programmed to betray you and expose you to danger. The hidden mechanics of excess, whether spiraling thoughts or spewed out words, are a sadistic game your own biology plays against you. To master human nature and not be just another pawn on the board, you need to see the invisible gears operating in the shadows of the mind. Why do you overthink? Because your ego is, at its core, a coward desperate for absolute certainties in a world governed by chaos. The act of overthinking is not strategic reasoning, it's a mental simulation of survival based on pure terror. You project hundreds of catastrophic scenarios, building imaginary labyrinths, in the pathetic illusion that by anticipating pain, you will be safe from it. But the mechanical truth is lethal. Anxiety is merely a false sense of control. By calculating endless what-ifs, you drain your vital energy, poison your own reasoning, and paralyze your ability to attack. You build with your own hands the bars of your prison. And why do you talk so much? This is where the power dynamic reveals itself in its rawest form. Talking excessively is a release valve for your inner tension. When true silence settles in a room, gravity shifts, the air becomes dense. The average person hates tension. They are crushed by the abyss of the unspoken. So as a cheap defense mechanism, they open their mouth. They spout unsolicited opinions, reveal plans ahead of time, and expose raw emotions because they simply lack the steely structure necessary to withstand the weight of mystery. Every unnecessary word that comes out of your mouth is a brick of your empire that you throw into the mud. The fundamental law of strategy is relentless. Whoever speaks less dictates the pace of the war. Silence creates a colossal psychological vacuum, and the human mind cannot tolerate vacuums. If you are ruthless enough to maintain silence, the other person will fight desperately to fill it, and in doing so, they stumble. They reveal their own insecurities, surrender their own weapons, and expose their own flaws. They play against themselves while you merely watch, unshaken from your mental throne. When you cut out the noise, your energy no longer dissipates. It condenses into a physical and overwhelming presence. And this leads us to the most humiliating mistake, because understanding this mechanism is just the warm-up. Now I'm going to expose the exact pattern that weakens you and how you destroy your own respect in moments when the pressure mounts. Think about the last time you were confronted. Don't lie to yourself, just recall the exact scene. Someone offended you, doubted your abilities, or simply adopted a cold and distant attitude towards you. What did you do? Your stomach churned, your heart raced, and in a fraction of a second, your frightened ego took complete control. You reacted. You rushed to defend yourself, started giving detailed explanations that nobody asked for, or worse, lashed out with the uncontrolled fury of someone desperate for control. This is the weak pattern. This is the pathetic choreography of the average man. He is an emotional puppet, and any predator with the slightest cruelty can pull his strings. A look of contempt, a snide email, or a prolonged silence is enough for the mediocre man to lose his composure and hand over all his power on a silver platter. The reactive man lives in a constant state of energy drain. He blindly believes that by shouting louder, justifying every step, or proving he is right in ridiculous debates, he is demonstrating strength. But cold reality is merciless. He is only proving how easily he can be domesticated. You've made this mistake before. You felt the miserable urge to be understood, the childish fear of being misinterpreted. And what did you gain from it? Their absolute respect, their admiration? No, you gained silent contempt. Because human beings possess an instinctive animalistic nose for the weakness of others, and nothing exudes more weakness than someone who compulsively needs to explain themselves to the world. When you're an open book, helpful and reactive, anyone feels entitled to tear your pages. The average person is terribly predictable, and everything that is predictable is easily hunted, manipulated, and crushed. Every time you react in the heat of the moment, every time your mouth moves faster than your lucidity, you abandon your own throne. You descend from your icy fortress to fight in the mud with the pigs, and while you expend all your vitality trying to repair your image in the minds of others, your own mind becomes a hell of anxiety and regret. But without the next point, you remain brutally vulnerable. Acknowledging your own humiliation is the first step, but it's not enough to get you out of the crosshairs. Now comes the part that changes everything. I'm going to give you the first mental weapon. This is where you experience your first power boost and begin to become dangerous. The first turning point isn't an action. It's the absolute suspension of it. The most lethal weapon you can forge in the workshop of your mind isn't a sharp argument, but the brutal ability to withstand tension without blinking. Your leap to sovereignty begins with building your own wall of ice. In the exact millisecond when external chaos tries to engulf you, be it a veiled provocation, a disrespectful tone of voice, or the crushing pressure of a hostile silence, your primitive brain will scream, demanding a reaction. Your wounded ego will beg for immediate retaliation. It is at this point, on the edge of the emotional precipice, that the weak plummet and the rare rise. Your first reaction is to refuse the reflex. You don't give in to the animal impulse, you lock the gears. You take a deep breath, freeze your own features, and erect an insurmountable boundary between the noise of the world and your inner empire. You cut off the oxygen to anyone who tries to control you. From today on, you don't see your opponents as threats, but as a strategist observes hysterical prey struggling with detachment, with clinical coldness, with a psychological superiority so unwavering that it even alters the air pressure in the room. The average man surrenders control of his emotions to any parasite. The predator, however, swallows the urgency. He moves only when, how, and if it is strategically advantageous. When you master the art of absorbing impact without returning a sound, you instantly invert the axis of power. The offense hits your armor and ricochets, cracking the foundations of the one who launched it. You cease to be a predictable target and become an inscrutable abyss. Anchored silence is an invisible poison, a punishment far more severe and paralyzing than uncontrolled fury. It warns the other side of the table without you moving a single muscle. You have no jurisdiction over my mental state. Your existence is too small to cause any fissure in my fortress. Feel the shift in gravity within your own mind. It's the unmistakable weight of the crown returning to your head. The creeping need for approval has just been decapitated. In its place awakens the icy and dangerous lucidity of one who has become truly untouchable. But mastering oneself is merely training in the castle courtyard, and this brings us to the most dangerous part. Now pay attention, because this is where the theme reveals its true face. What happens to other people's minds when you project this ice outward? When you finally abandon the unhealthy need to explain yourself and don the armor of absolute silence, the physical reality around you undergoes a magnetic distortion. The social application of this posture is not only effective, it is psychologically overwhelming for anyone who crosses your path. The world is addicted to people who are easy to read. The average person is a luminous billboard of their own needs, revealing their emotions in every hurried gesture and every anxious phrase. But when you enter the arena with the gaze of someone who has already deciphered the hidden rules of the game, refusing to overflow, people lose their footing. You break their script. By denying the predictable answer, by denying the cheap validation they demand, you create a terrifying vacuum that the other mind feels desperately compelled to fill. Observe the shift in dynamics with the coldness of a predator. Faced with your unwavering stillness, the arrogant and the foolish will begin to doubt themselves. The tension that once gnawed at your stomach is now entirely transferred to their laps. They will speak faster, try to justify themselves, reveal secrets, and project their own insecurities into the abyss of your silence. Without you drawing a single weapon, the opponent crumbles on their own. As they try to decipher what is going on in your mind, they begin to orbit your center of gravity. Your mystery imprisons them. This is how true magnetism operates. It is not a hysterical effort to convince, but a lethal presence that attracts, disarms, and subdues. The respect you once hunted for like a needy servant is now extracted brutally and involuntarily. They don't lower their guard because you shouted louder or because you proved your point. They retreat because animal instinct tells them you possess a silent dominance they could never withstand. Your focus has become your throne. You govern the rhythm of the interaction, becoming the silent authority in the room. But pay attention, because all this social superiority, however drunken it may be, is just a shell. The real war was never fought against the fools around you, but there's an even deeper layer, and it's here that the game ceases to be external and becomes brutally internal, where almost no one dares to tread. The armor of silence you've built on the outside is useless if inside you're still a prisoner. And it's here that the game ceases to be external and becomes brutally internal. The great illusion is believing that your daily war is against the provocations of the world or against the people who underestimate you. No, the true battlefield is invisible, and your deadliest enemy has your own face. The compulsion to speak, to justify oneself, and to think in a spiral is not a simple social miscalculation. It is the symptom of a festering wound at the very center of your identity. It is your fragile and terrified ego begging to exist in the minds of others. Pay close attention to what is hidden in the abyss of yourself. You only struggle with anxiety and spout words because you harbor a creeping need for validation. You are secretly addicted to the approval of others. Your sense of power still depends on the permission and gaze of the world. The average man builds entire prisons in his mind because he has a visceral fear of emptiness itself. He fears that if he doesn't make a sound, if he doesn't prove his worth and anticipate all sorts of imaginary disasters, he will simply disappear. Overanalysis is pure fear disguised as tactical intelligence. The desperate need to speak is the begging of the soul disguised as persuasion. As long as there's even a single millimeter of need for approval throbbing within you, any predator can find that crack and shatter you. Your outward silence will be nothing more than a very thin mask of ice, covering an interior of utter despair. And believe me, the world smells the emotional beggar hidden beneath the king's robes. True sovereignty is only consolidated when you cauterize that wound with fire. When you not only close your lips but annihilate once and for all the unhealthy need to be heard. Now pay attention, because the next point changes everything. Knowing that you are a prisoner of your own ego is only the diagnosis. Healing requires a definitive break, and that leads us to the part where you cease to exist as you once were. The technique dies here. There comes a point in the architecture of power where pretending is no longer enough. What we're doing now isn't applying a diplomatic bandage to a character flaw, it's tearing away the dead flesh with our own hands. True transformation, your point of no return, doesn't happen when you simply learn to hold your tongue in an argument. It happens the millisecond you look in the mirror of your past and feel a brutal loathing for your own old self. That needy shadow, enslaved by validation, begging for crumbs of approval and letting itself bleed to the last drop of vital energy to please irrelevant people. That reactive and fearful man who lived within him needs to be executed now, without hesitation, without mourning. The breaking point is a psychological death followed by a frigid rebirth. It is the lethal moment when your need to exist in the eyes of the world is reduced to ashes. You are no longer playing the role of a strategist. Ice has finally taken over your blood. You have become the fortress itself. From today onward, when the mediocre try to decipher you, they will no longer find a puzzle eager to be assembled and understood. They will face pure abyss, and the abyss never apologizes. The abyss never debates. The sovereign predator feels no urgency to roar at every step to validate its own danger. Its calculated immobility already exudes a warning of sovereignty. Feel the weight of this identity rupture anchoring itself in your body. That suffocating excess of thoughts and uncontrollable verbal incontinence were the humiliating shackles of a slave. Now your focus is a blind weapon, sharpened in the black fire of self-mastery. Your mind has ceased to be a muddy trench and has risen like the throne room of an unshakable empire. When they try to drag you back into the noise, you will no longer feel anger, only the cold detachment of one who refuses to be a puppet. The new mask has merged with the face, but for this new identity to be set in stone and withstand the ravages of time, it needs to be transformed into something greater. Now I will give you the vision that will solidify this crown forever, because we will elevate this to the ultimate rule of existence. What we have forged so far is not merely a set of adaptive reactions, it is an unwavering philosophical foundation for your survival and your reign. Silence and focus have ceased to be damage control tools and have become your only compass, your unbreakable rule of gravity. By adopting this stance, you embrace a worldview where clarity is the only currency of true value. Understand the cruel beauty of this doctrine. Life is a stage inhabited for the most part by tragic and noisy actors struggling in the shadows of their own illusions and bound to the wheel of useless anxiety. They consume their vitality in deafening monologues and illusory battles that only prove their own inner bankruptcy. Observing this theater of the desperate, you no longer feel contempt. You feel the profound serenity of one who no longer plays this miserable game. You are no longer part of the audience. You are the spectator in the dark and solitary box, watching the play, aware that each of your movements is in fact a script that dictates the laws of the stage. Your refusal to think compulsively is not the end of reason, it is the dawn of Schopenhauer's sharp lucidity, realizing that true pain is the uncontrolled desire of the ego. Your refusal to expose yourself through unnecessary words is not timidity, it is the Machiavellian mastery of one who understands that mystery is not an escape, but the best of fortifications. You have now transcended the reactive, you have reached the supreme state of not needing. That cage descendiditum. You are the hard stone, the presence that does not allow itself to be consumed by the corrosion of trivialities. The highest elevation is understanding that power does not belong to the one who controls others with speeches or brute force, but to the one who controls himself in such a way that others will bow before the magnetic silence of the abyss you have become. Feel the purity and coldness of this ultimate self-mastery. The empire is now yours, but this crown is not worn with impunity. The crown of self-mastery only crushes the heads of the weak. For you now it is your impenetrable armor. The deciphering process is over. What emerges from the ashes of your old reactive identity is the coldest and most crystalline sovereignty. Look around with the eyes of someone who has finally awakened. The world will remain noisy. The average person will continue bleeding their own vital energy, begging for validation, vomiting empty words, and drowning in the court of their own mind. They will continue operating as predictable prey, manipulated by any offense or prolonged silence. But you no longer inhabit that dimension of mental enslavement. You have crossed to the abyss. From this very millisecond, your silence is the empire where only you dictate the laws. When chaos tries to seduce you into battle, when parasites try to elicit a childish reaction from your ego, they will brutally collide against a wall of black ice. They will find only the merciless gaze of one who has mastered the hidden machinery. You have ceased to be a blind piece on the chessboard of others. You have become gravity itself. This is not the closing of an ordinary video. It's a rite of passage, a seal of initiation marked on your posture. If you survived this deconstruction, if you felt your power rise while your neediness was suffocated, you are not a mere spectator. You have just entered a restricted circle, a silent order of strategic, ruthless, and dangerous minds. If you've claimed your fortress today, head down to the comments and mark this territory with a single word: sovereignty. This is our unspoken pact, the tribal recognition of those who no longer react to the world, but subjugate it from within. Sign up and solidify your presence here, because our journey through the shadows of human nature has only just begun. The fool makes noise to prove he exists. The master observes in absolute silence until the moment of checkmate.